Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you lost yourself, only to be cast aside like you meant nothing? Today we follow Emma Dawson, a poor girl betrayed and broken, who rises to stun the entire American elite. If you believe that real love and justice always find a way back, this story is for you. Comment love if your heart is ready for the twists. And don't forget to subscribe to Soul and Love Stories for more powerful tales that will move your soul. Emma Dawson woke in her modest Brooklyn apartment, where morning light slipped through worn curtains, illuminating a photo of her and her grandmother, Helen, beaming in Prospect Park. The scent of bagels from the deli downstairs mingled with the rumble of the subway, signaling a hectic day ahead. At 29, Emma was the assistant to Jack Preston, CEO of Preston Enterprises, a billion-dollar Manhattan investment firm. But she was more than that. For 3 years, Emma had been Jack's secret lover, their unnamed relationship hidden in the shadows of glittering skyscrapers. Jack, 35, was the kind of man who inspired both awe and unease. His piercing blue eyes and rare, heart-stopping smile made Emma's pulse race, but a fear of commitment, rooted in his parents' messy divorce, kept him guarded. "I'm not ready to go public, Emma," he'd say, his tone gentle yet firm, as if that excused her hurt. Emma, soft-hearted, lived in his shadow, though each time he said it, she felt smaller. Her apartment was simple, a faded sofa, a small table piled with hospital bills. Emma's mom died when she was young, leaving her to be raised by Helen Dawson, a sharp-witted 70-year-old who loved golf and blunt talk, now battling heart disease in a Queens hospital. To cover costs, Emma moonlighted weekends at a corner cafe, pouring lattes and chatting with neighbors about the weather or Yankees games. Hardworking and independent, she yearned for love, something Jack seemed unable to give. Emma always carried a small notebook in her purse, scribbling down Jack's rare, sweet words. "You're the only one who gets me," or "I can't imagine a day without you." She reread them on lonely nights, clinging to hope. Lately, though, they only brought pain. Jack controlled her, her outfits, her friends, but never took her to company events or introduced her to anyone. "Work comes first, you know that," he'd say, and Emma nodded, though her heart cracked. Today she stood before her mirror, smoothing a navy dress Jack once complimented. She slipped on the silver bracelet he gave her last birthday, the only proof they'd been something, engraved with a tiny J and E inside. Sighing, she told herself to stay strong, but her eyes reflected a question. Don't I deserve more? Outside, New York buzzed as always, but in Emma's heart, a storm was brewing, ready to upend everything she'd held on to. The charity gala at a luxurious Manhattan hotel sparkled under chandelier glow, the air alive with the clink of champagne glasses. Guests in sleek tuxedos and shimmering gowns wove through the crowd, exchanging practiced smiles and murmurs of corporate goodwill. Emma Dawson, relegated to a backstage role for Preston Enterprises, stood in a dim corner, scanning the guest list on her iPad. Her plain black dress clung to her frame, but amidst the radiant attendees, she was a ghost. Invisibility was her norm, both in her job and in Jack Preston's shadowed world. Jack commanded the ballroom center, his tailored black tuxedo highlighting his commanding presence. But Emma's heart didn't race for him. It seized at the sight of Vanessa Hartley, heiress to a financial empire, her red gown blazing like a torch. They clasped hands, flashing perfect smiles for flashing cameras. "New York's power couple," a photographer crowed, sparking applause. Emma froze, her grip tightening on the iPad, the ground beneath her seeming to dissolve. She tried to slip away, but a nearby conversation halted her. Vanessa, chatting with a friend, sneered, "Jack needs a wife who elevates his status. He gets it." Her voice cut like glass, dismissing Emma, or anyone Jack had loved, as a disposable piece in his game. Emma's breath hitched. 3 years of devotion, of sacrificing her own light, only to see him choose a better match. She searched Jack's face, desperate for him to notice her, to acknowledge her pain, but he only leaned closer to Vanessa, whispering, his smile polished and serene. Emma quietly exited the ballroom, stepping into New York's misty drizzle. Times Square's neon lights blurred through the rain, reflecting the hurt in her eyes. She paused under an awning, slipping off the silver bracelet, Jack's sole gift, etched with a faint J and E inside, and tucked it into his coat pocket, left backstage. "I'm worth more than this," she whispered, her voice shaky but firm. Rain seeped through her coat, but for the first time in 3 years, Emma tasted freedom. The next morning, Emma sent a curt resignation email to HR, no reasons given. She changed her phone number, erased Jack's texts, and locked her social media accounts. Returning to Brooklyn, she found her grandmother Helen brewing tea, asking, "What's got you so glum, kiddo?" Emma forced a smile, hugging her tightly, shielding Helen from her turmoil. Deep down, she knew she'd cut the last thread tying her to Jack Preston. In his stark Manhattan penthouse, Jack woke to a hollow feeling he couldn't name. Rifling through his coat, he found the silver bracelet, its gleam a quiet accusation. He dialed Emma, but the line was dead. Loss hit him, sharp and unfamiliar, yet his ego murmured, "She'll come back. They always do." Outside, New York's pulse never faltered, but no one warned Jack he'd lost the one person who'd cared beyond his wealth. Emma sat with Helen, sipping tea, the Brooklyn sunrise warming their small apartment. She clutched her notebook, once filled with Jack's fleeting sweet words, now blank, ready for her own story. The city roared beyond, but Emma's storm was calming. She'd walked away from shadows, stepping toward a light she was only beginning to claim, one where her worth wasn't defined by a man who couldn't see her. Jack Preston sat in his corner office on the 45th floor of Preston Enterprises, Manhattan's skyline sprawling before him, but his thoughts were elsewhere. 2 weeks had passed since the charity gala, and Emma Dawson had slipped out of his life like a quiet gust. The silver bracelet, etched with J and E, rested on his desk, a mute testament to what he'd taken for granted. He had dialed her number countless times, only to hear the cold automated message. "This number is no longer in service." He told himself she was just upset, but a hollow ache began to erode his confidence. The company was spiraling. Emma wasn't merely a secretary, she was the linchpin, managing schedules and soothing difficult clients with ease. Without her, projects faltered, emails piled up, and Jack saw how much he'd relied on her. In a meeting, as Vanessa Hartley, now his official partner, entered with her polished smile, Jack's mind wandered to Emma. Soft-spoken, steady, genuine. Vanessa pitched PR plans, but he could only recall Emma's knack for making his coffee just right, no questions asked. One afternoon, rummaging through Emma's desk for a missing file, Jack found a small, weathered leather notebook. He opened it, and his chest tightened. Emma's neat handwriting preserved his rare tender words. "You bring me calm," or "I can't picture life without you." Next to them, her own notes. "He smiled today. Maybe he means it." Jack's breath hitched. He hadn't known she'd clung to these moments, treating them like treasures. His selfishness stared back at him, and guilt, sharp and unfamiliar, took hold. Driven to find her, Jack visited the Brooklyn cafe where Emma had worked weekends. A new barista with green-streaked hair frowned when he fumbled a latte order. "Dawson's gone," she snapped, turning away. Jack stood amid the hum of jazz and coffee scents, struck by how little he knew of Emma's world. Scouring company records, he uncovered an old hospital bill Emma had silently paid. Not for her grandmother, but for Jack's aunt, hospitalized last year. He froze. She'd handled it without a whisper, while he'd been oblivious. Jack took to Brooklyn streets, hoping to glimpse Emma. He paused outside the bagel shop she'd once mentioned, scanning faces, but she wasn't there. Each step deepened his realization of her importance. Not just for work, but because she alone saw past his CEO facade to the man beneath. Now she was gone, and he had no clue how to win her back. New York thrummed outside, but Jack's world felt like it was unraveling, thread by thread. In his penthouse that night, Jack held the bracelet, its faint J and E glinting like a reprimand. He tried her number again, met with silence. The city's lights flickered beyond his window, indifferent to the void in his chest. Emma had been his anchor, and he'd let her drift away, assuming she'd always stay. Now, facing a life without her quiet strength, Jack wondered if his pride had cost him the one person who'd made his days brighter. whose absence left his glittering empire feeling empty and cold. Emma Dawson stood in her modest Brooklyn apartment, morning light filtering through the window, illuminating a letter from the Dawson Foundation. It invited her to a Manhattan gala, vaguely calling her someone special. Emma frowned, suspecting a mix-up, but her grandmother Helen, sipping tea at the table, smiled cryptically. "Go, kiddo. There's something you need to know," she said, her voice warm yet firm, as if privy to a secret Emma couldn't fathom. The gala unfolded in a grand hall, glass plaques honoring donors and elegantly dressed guests filling the space. Emma, in a simple navy dress, felt out of place among the polished crowd. She sat in the back, quietly observing. The MC, a middle-aged woman with a soothing voice, spoke about the Dawson Foundation, a charity funding free health care from Brooklyn to Harlem. Emma listened, puzzled about her presence. Then came the moment that changed everything. The MC called Helen Dawson to the stage. Emma's jaw dropped as her grandmother, usually in sweaters and golf gear, stepped up in a gown, exuding the confidence of a world shaper. Helen took the mic, gazing at the crowd. "The Dawson Foundation was born from my daughter's heart, Emma's mother," she said, voice catching. "Today, I introduce its sole heir, my granddaughter Emma." The hall erupted in applause, and Emma, cheeks burning, was gently nudged on stage. Helen hugged her tightly, whispering, "You don't need wealth to prove your worth. You've done it with your heart." Emma stood stunned, learning the truth. Helen wasn't just a golf-loving grandma, but the foundation's founder, quietly watching Emma for 3 years, testing her kindness through acts like paying strangers hospital bills or working cafe shifts to support her. "I'm proud you stood on your own," Helen said, eyes misty. The crowd rose, clapping, and Emma for the first time felt truly seen. In the hall's corner, Jack Preston's heart stopped. He'd come after a former colleague mentioned the event, hoping to see Emma, to apologize. Now he was floored. The woman he'd undervalued, kept in the shadows, was the centerpiece of a profound legacy. He recalled meeting Emma, a girl in a worn sweater, her warm smile lighting up a rainy day as she handed him coffee. He'd missed her worth, and now, amid the applauding crowd, he knew he'd lost something irreplaceable. Emma didn't notice Jack. On stage, clutching Helen, she felt 3 years of pain dissolving. She was no longer a secret lover or an invisible assistant. She was Emma Dawson, heir to a legacy, and above all, herself. As the stage lights dimmed, Jack gripped the silver bracelet in his pocket, its J and E engraving a bitter reminder. An apology wouldn't suffice. He'd have to start over, not to save her, but to prove he deserved her. Emma Dawson sat in her new office at the Dawson Foundation in Brooklyn, morning light filtering through the window, casting a glow on a painting she'd hung. A vivid autumn view of Prospect Park, where she'd strolled with her grandmother Helen. After the gala where she was honored, Emma had joined the foundation, dedicating herself to free healthcare initiatives. She'd also started a local art class, pouring old wounds onto canvas, each stroke helping her rediscover self-love. Her world no longer orbited Jack Preston, and for the first time, she felt complete, her heart no longer tethered to his shadows. Jack, meanwhile, refused to let go. Post-gala, he showed up at Emma's office, gripping a bouquet of white daisies, her favorite, she'd once noted, for their quiet resilience. But standing before her, his planned apology faltered. Emma, in a green sweater, met him with a steady gaze and a faint smile. "I don't need you to save me anymore, Jack," she said, her voice soft yet unyielding. "I've saved myself." Jack stood speechless, seeing she wasn't the woman who'd lingered for his approval. But he didn't walk away, not from arrogance, but from a genuine desire to right his wrongs. He began with small steps. He practiced making BBQ ribs, a dish Emma had once complimented during a rare shared dinner. He brought daisies to her office, leaving them at the front desk with a note. "Just want you to smile today. Jay," never pressuring her to respond. More significantly, he volunteered at a Dawson Foundation health clinic. There he witnessed single mothers queuing for prescriptions, elderly patients sharing tales of hardship, and started to understand the struggles Emma had quietly borne, like covering hospital bills for strangers. Jack's greatest test was working under Helen Dawson. With a gaze that could cut glass, Helen conveniently made him an administrative assistant. Jack, a CEO accustomed to giving orders, struggled with a temperamental photocopier, spilled coffee on his crisp shirt, and endured Helen's sharp critiques for misfiling documents. One day, he dropped a stack of papers, blushing as Helen coolly gathered them, saying, "Being decent isn't tough, Jack. Just stop being an idiot." He swallowed his pride, knowing she was right. Another time, Helen offhandedly shared how Emma had worked late cafe shifts to pay her medical bills, leaving Jack silent, guilt pooling in his chest. Emma, initially wary, began to see Jack's transformation. He was no longer the haughty CEO, but a man awkwardly brewing Helen's tea, listening patiently as clinic patients recounted their lives. One afternoon, she spotted him at the clinic, guiding an elderly woman through insurance paperwork. He looked up, offering a sheepish smile, and Emma glimpsed a Jack she'd never met, flawed but earnest. Her heart thawed, though she stayed guarded. In art class, she painted two figures holding hands under New York's glowing lights, not to rekindle dreams, but to confront her past. She hung it in her office, a reminder she'd forgiven without forgetting. One day, Jack arrived with a plate of his BBQ ribs, slightly overcooked, and Emma burst out laughing, her first genuine laugh with him in 3 years. "You're still hopeless," she teased, but her eyes softened. Jack's pulse quickened, aware the journey was far from over, but he was committed, not to possess her, but to earn her trust. Outside, Brooklyn buzzed with life. Bagel aromas, subway clatter, neighbors' chatter. Emma's office walls bloomed with her paintings, each marking a step toward healing. Jack, leaving the clinic, clutched a patient thank you note, a quiet win in his quest for redemption. Their paths, once knotted in secrecy, were slowly converging, not through grand promises, but through steady, sincere efforts. In her apartment that evening, Emma sketched a new canvas, her heart lighter. Helen, sipping tea, grinned knowingly, sensing Emma's shift. Across the river, Jack sat in his penthouse, no longer cold, rereading Emma's old notebook, her recorded kindness fueling his resolve. New York's skyline sparkled beyond, but their story, rebuilt on humility and second chances, was brighter, a testament to love that grows not in shadows, but in the patient light of trying again. A year later, the Grace Dawson Center, named for Emma's mother, opened in Brooklyn under a radiant autumn sun. Its modern design, with wide glass windows and a cozy patient garden, felt warm and inviting. Beyond offering free medical care, the center provided mental health programs. Emma's vision to help those wounded like she once was rediscover hope. A diverse crowd, locals, donors, volunteers gathered, erupting in cheers as Emma stepped to the podium for her speech. Wearing a simple green dress, Emma spoke of her mother's dreams for a healthier Brooklyn and her own path from a life in shadows to standing here, whole and confident. "Love isn't just about finding someone to love," she said, her eyes gleaming with conviction. "It's about finding yourself." The audience clapped warmly, and at the back of the hall, Jack Preston stood quietly, the silver bracelet engraved with J and E, once left behind by Emma, glinting on his wrist. Watching her, his heart swelled with pride and a fragile hope. Jack, the center's primary donor, hadn't sought recognition. He'd worked behind the scenes, funding the project, and even helping paint the garden's benches. Today, dressed in a plain shirt, he was no longer the polished CEO, but a man determined to show he'd changed. As Emma concluded her speech, she stepped down, her gaze catching his in the crowd. She hesitated, then offered a smile. Genuine, open, free of the walls she'd once built. Emma led him to a quiet corner inside the center, where a painting she'd created hung proudly. Two figures holding hands beneath New York's twinkling lights, vibrant yet rooted in truth. "I painted this to forgive," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Not to forget." Jack studied the canvas, then turned to her, his eyes misty. "I'm still a fool," he said, voice hoarse, "but I want to be yours." Emma laughed, a sound bright and unguarded, and in that instant, she reached for his hand, the years of distance melting away. They stood together, hands entwined, as applause from the ceremony reverberated through the hall. Helen, seated up front in her beloved golf hat, exhaled with relief. Love isn't finding someone flawless, she told a neighbor, but someone who'll own their mistakes for you. With a mischievous smirk, she added, I'm old, just hoping for great-grandkids before I tee off for good up there. Nearby guests chuckled, and Emma, catching the comment, flushed, casting Jack a glance that mixed embarrassment with quiet joy. As the event wrapped up, Emma and Jack strolled to the center's garden, where golden leaves drifted silently to the ground. New York's pulse thrummed in the distance, but for them, the world shrank to this shared moment. Thank you for not giving up, Emma whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. Jack tightened his grip on her hand, aware this wasn't the end but the start of a new chapter, one where they'd heal, grow, and love side by side. The garden's daisies swayed gently, mirroring their renewed bond, a testament to second chances forged through effort and heart. Emma Dawson's journey proves that even after heartbreak, strength and truth can still shine through. If her story touched your heart, drop a love in the comments and let us know what moment moved you most. And don't forget to subscribe to Soul and Love Stories, where every story reminds us that love, courage, and second chances still matter.